Well, we're now after Easter. Think about it. Jesus has died. In dying, he's conquered sin. And therefore, it's possible for everybody to come to God. He's risen. He's come back to life. And therefore, we know that what he did on the cross is accepted. And the disciples can see him. He's risen. He's alive. Just imagine, under those circumstances, you're the evil one. You're Satan, you're the devil, you're the one who's tried to stop, throughout history, people coming to God. What can you do about it now? Surely the victory has won. Christ has defeated sin. He's defeated death. He's made it possible for all of us to come to God. You're the evil one. You wanted to stop it. What is your only strategy left? What can you do now? And the answer is simply this. All you can do is cover that reality up. Stop people from knowing that way through us to come to God is open. And that really is at the heart of this passage that Charity has just read to us from Matthew chapter 28, verses 10 to 20. That was the evil one's only strategy, to stop it being known what Christ had done, to stop people hearing that Jesus has risen from the dead. And that's what we see in our passage. And how was it done? The guards from the tomb were paid a bribe. They were paid money. Stop it being known. Tell them something different. He was covering it up. And actually, that's really worth knowing, because in a sort of a way, that's what we all face today. The pressure, the temptation, the influence to let it be covered up, that Jesus, by dying on the cross and rising again, has made a way where we can come back to God. Think about it. Think about our education system. What can we say in schools? Yes, you can talk about the Christian faith. You can talk about practices and rituals that we do. You can talk about Christian values. But what we can't do is talk about the fact that Jesus died for sin to make it possible for us to come to God, that he's risen, that we can know him today, that we can have a new life in him. No, that's too far. So there's pressure to keep it quiet. Think about the media. I'll never forget, early on in my ministry, I was interviewed by the BBC. I was living in the northeast of England. It was BBC Radio Leeds wanted to interview me. Well, I know what the BBC can be like at times, and I thought, what do I really want to get across? I want to get across the gospel. So I sort of planned it. When they asked questions, I must admit, I was a bit of a politician. You know how when they sort of ask you, when the politicians ask a question, they say, well, thank you for asking me that. I'm going to tell you what I really want you to know. So I tried to do that because they were trying to ask questions that were really off the theme of what Christian ministry is all about. So I did. And I kept answering and putting in bits of the gospel and how it changed my life and how we can really trust that Jesus died and rose again. And then on Sunday morning, it was broadcast and I was in church, so I couldn't listen. So I recorded it and I listened to the recording. Do you know what they did? The bits that they were happy with of what I was saying, they left in. And then they faded music in over what they didn't want to hear, and then faded back to the interview to cut out the real heart of the gospel. It's a struggle. But actually, it's more of a struggle than that. It's a struggle for all of us. How many of us have thought at some point in our life, those of us who are Christian believers, yeah, that person really needs to know the gospel. They really need to know Christ, and this is my opportunity to tell them, and we haven't taken it. We just haven't done it. Why not? Why don't we take those opportunities that we have to share the gospel? And actually, the answer is found in this passage. What we're told is that Jesus commissioned his disciples. He appeared to them and he said, I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Now you go and you share, if you like, this good news. You take this gospel of what I've done and you let it be known to the world. The Great Commission. Why did he need to tell them that? They'd seen him die. They'd heard in the years leading up to that all of his teaching. They knew that he was risen. Why did he need to tell them? Simply because they doubted. And doubt is the big enemy. Doubt is the problem that many of us struggle with. Why don't we share the gospel with those people we know, we work with in our workplace, we live by as our neighbours? Why don't we share the gospel with them? At the heart of it, is it doubt? Even the disciples, this passage tells us, doubted. Marina spoke on doubt last week when she spoke on Thomas. Remember doubting Thomas? And Marina spoke on the passage where Jesus had appeared first after he'd risen to his disciples, but Thomas wasn't there. And they told him, and he said, unless I see him, unless I actually put my hand in his side and put my finger in the holes in his hand, I'm not going to believe. Can you remember how Jesus responded to that? The heart of that passage is Jesus appeared to him. Yes, Thomas had doubts, but Jesus addressed his doubts. He helped him in that situation. I mean, isn't it so encouraging that Jesus didn't say, well, if that's your attitude, Thomas, you've made your choice. I'll see you on Judgment Day. You've decided. You want nothing to do with me. Get on with it. He could have done. Jesus isn't like that. God isn't like that. He wants us to know. He wants us to believe. He helps us overcome doubts. So he appeared to Thomas and he said, if that's what it takes, you put your hand into my side. You feel the holes in my hand. And he helped him to believe. You know, that's something that God has done throughout history. I always find it helpful and interesting whenever we hit something in the New Testament to look and see how we see that in God in the Old. Genesis chapter 18, right at the beginning of the Bible, God has already appeared to Abraham and made him promises that his descendants would be as numerous as the sands on the seashore. He made these promises that through his descendants, all people on earth would be blessed. And then in Genesis chapter 18, God appears to Abraham in human form, and he's talking to him. What Abraham hasn't grasped is that actually this descendant, or these descendants, are going to come from him and his wife Sarah, both of whom were extremely old. And God makes this promise to him, no, it will be through Sarah. And do you know what? Why does Sarah respond? She laughed. He said, I'm in the 90s. Not possible. She doubted. But God saw them through the doubts and made his plan come true. We can see the same in Moses. Moses in Exodus, the man who brought Israel out of slavery in Egypt. In Exodus chapter 3, God appears to him and says, I want you to go to Pharaoh and to tell him to let my people go. And Moses says, who am I to go to Pharaoh? He doubted that he could do it. But of course, that's what happened. And in fact, if we look at the prophet Jeremiah chapter 1, God says to Jeremiah, I want you to be my prophet. I want you to take the message of myself to the people of Israel and particularly the people of Judah. And Jeremiah says, I'm too young. He doubted he could do it. You know, we all suffer from doubt. But what we see is that actually God's purpose and God's ways is to help us to overcome our doubts, to overcome our fears, and to fulfill his great plan. Because the devil's only got one strategy, and that's to silence the good news of the gospel. Well, let's just think about that for a moment. We're sort of sitting in groups, and we can move at this point if we want. But we're going to just put 3 questions for us to think about and chat about, and then we can feedback if we want, up on the screen. The questions are these, if we can pop them up, Douglas. When did I last share Christ? Share the gospel with somebody else. When did I last do that? Was it hard to do And what are the things that sometimes stop my sharing the faith that I have? Questions for, we'll just take a couple of minutes. Talk to the person next to you, talk to whoever you're comfortable with, or if you need to move around, do that. We'll just take a few minutes just to do that. 3 questions. When did I last share Christ? That's a challenging one, I think, for all of us. Was it hard to do? And what are the things that sometimes stop me from sharing my faith? Over to you. No, it's always a helpful exercise to ask ourselves those questions. Are we sharing our faith? If we're not sharing our faith, what is hindering us and praying it through? Because doubt has always been a problem with which disciples have struggled. Think about Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8, we've got the story of Jesus in the boat. He's asleep in the boat and he's travelling with his disciples, and a storm comes up. And the disciples are terrified and he's asleep, so they wake him up. And what does he say to them? You have little faith. They had their doubts. And what did he do? He calmed the storm. He made it possible for them to continue their journey. That's what Jesus does. And I'd just like to close with some, I think, encouraging words from 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. It says this: so be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. You know, we are to be expecting trials and these challenges. Goes on, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honour on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. We've got a calling, the Great Commission, to make what Christ has done known, to go into the world to make disciples, to share the good news of what he's done with others, and to teach them everything that he's taught. And as we do that, we look forward to the day when he's coming again. That's our commission. And the promise that we get in the end of our passage, Jesus says, go make disciples, and I will be with you always. Yes, we find it a struggle. Of course it's hard. Let's pray for that, because God, by his nature, meets us where we are and helps us in his purpose. That's the Great Commission of Jesus Christ to the church.